Welcome, Yvette. So glad to have you here.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here with you.
Thank you. So I met Yvette quite recently, but we have so much in common that it was just it was a mystery how it took us so long to have met. And let me share your um, okay. Actually, first I want to be responsible. Brian, we got your communication. I'm so sorry.
Mm.
So good luck if we do, if we do lose you partway through this conversation. Um, and uh, Given that, I'm going to share about Yvette. So Yvette is a clinical psychologist and podcast host. Um, do you have a business name? Oh, there it is. That you're the owner of Conversations from the Heart. Somehow things got
Mhm.
disarranged here.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna move this to here. Okay. Um, so Yvette is a clinical psychology writer, speaker, and host of the Conversations from the Heart podcast. She's dedicated to helping people cultivate compassion, relational intelligence, and inner sovereignty through trauma informed, nonviolent, and heart centered practices. With more than 2 decades of experience in psychology, education, and cross cultural work, Yvette guides individuals and communities in returning non love with love, dismantling systems of harm, and building lives rooted in connection and wholeness. Her work integrates psychology, spirituality, and social change to support a kinder, freer, and more just world. So, yeah, welcome, Yvette. So,
Hi.
so
Where do you
great.
want to start? What do you want to talk about?
We'll yeah, we'll ask these questions. This was a really good tell us about your work type question. What
Hmm.
drew you to the path of nonviolence and heart-centered living, and how has it shaped your work?
Okay, there's so many ways I could answer that. Essentially, I grew up in South Africa. Well, to South African parents during apartheid. Um, and I grew up definitely, my history was growing up in systems of colonialism, racism, and patriarchy, and fundamentalist religion.
Mm,
So those are the systems that I began in. And of course, I didn't have those words for those systems.
sure.
As I was growing up, that was just how life worked. That was
Of
just
course.
good.
That was just the world.
That
Right.
was just the world. That was good and that was normal, in fact, right? And so I sort of grew up absorbing the rules, the practices, the assumptions. And as a white person in racism, of course, I remember as a child feeling so grateful that I was born white, for example. And as a Christian, I was so lucky that I was born Christian. Like I just like hit the jackpot. It was not so great to be a female, actually. That was my like, okay, well, I guess we can't get everything,
Mm,
you know.
mhm.
But in fact, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in middle school in South Africa, um, I went to school at a time when there was still corporal punishment and you'd be smacked with rulers and
Mm,
things, but
mhm.
also girls and boys were separated, and boys got to go and do woodworking at a certain point in the day, and girls had to go and learn cooking and sewing. And I remember making an appointment at like 11 with the principal of my school saying that I had zero interest in cooking and sewing, but I had a lot of interest in woodworking because I would like to learn how to build a cage for my pet rats. And I wanted to make sure that it had obstacle courses and I would get so much more out of the woodworking course than the
Mhm,
cooking and
mhm.
sewing. Now, I was not allowed. They would not allow me. But this is how I sort of bumped up against how our identities really shape our worldview and our lived experience. And then my father was a diplomat for the South African government. So he was very entrenched in holding up the system and very invested in the system. While my mother was a bit of a social activist and actively spoke up against the system, and her work was in what was called community development.
Mhm.
Um, and so there was a lot of tension in my household as I would hear my mother railing against the government and then hearing my father sort of, the voice of reason in the house. And so those opposites, were difficult. They were very difficult to reconcile on the inside. And I think one of the main things that I learned from that was that there is a difference between systems that run on power and violence and domination, and those that run on an ethic of care and connection and interdependence. My mother stood for one of them. My father stood for another one. And tribal-based cultures protect some people, but at the expense of harming a lot of other people. And my tender little heart had a very hard time reconciling this as I was growing up. So when I came across, now fast forward, through my life, we lived in South Africa and then in Malawi and then in Germany. And then I went to high school in LA. And then while we were and then I went to the U of M. Anyway, at a point, I came across nonviolent communication. That was one of the many things that was transformative. And that gave me a language to begin articulating what I felt like my soul had always known. And I suddenly had a very practical framework to begin putting into action the things that I have always felt like my heart and soul have wanted to express more clearly. So that's a lot of, how some of that shaped my work. I wonder what follow-up questions you have
Yeah.
about that or.
Yeah. Good. Let
Mm.
me look. Um, yeah, I have what I'm curious about,
Go
and
ahead.
I'm not sure it's what moves the conversation forward. Um, Actually, no. First thing I was going to say is my middle school was very progressive. We all did woodshop and cooking.
So jealous.
It was really good. I
So
I
great.
I love what I learned in all of those. The
Hmm.
metalwork I never had an opportunity to do anywhere else, but the
No.
woodworking, the sewing, the cooking,
Mhm.
and
You know, I love that. And then let me just tell you a quick follow-up because I have a stepfather who was born in North Dakota and was a Lutheran pastor and then left the church. And he was also a master carpenter. And one of the very best, um, I think it was a birthday present that I got from him, was 4 pieces of wood, all wrapped up with a note that said, "Unlimited time in the wood shop, learning how to make furniture of your choosing."
oh,
Yeah.
so
And
lovely.
then I spent he was always in the shop in his big carpentry, woodworking shop on Mondays. And so I just spent a whole series of Mondays learning. And I still have pieces of furniture that I made with him back then. So I finally did get it in the States back then.
Through another doorway.
That's
Um,
right.
and then I also want to be responsible. Not everybody watching
Mm,
this is
mm,
from the United States. So LA
mhm.
is Los Angeles, U of M is University of Michigan.
Minnesota. So there you go.
Oh,
I could have been clearer.
oh,
University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. I know somebody who worked there for many years, and
Mm,
okay, yeah, okay. So U of M versus UM. No, I think anyway. I'll ask my Michigan people. So even with me knowing so much about the the Great Lakes region of the U.S., I didn't even
mhm,
get the acronym right.
mhm.
Okay. And then I want a clarifying question. So you were saying there were two really different views of the government in your home,
Mhm, mhm.
and you didn't, and it was difficult to reconcile them. And
Yeah.
yeah, and you're saying that's how you started to realize that you wanted to find a way to reconcile conflict, or
Hmm.
just
Yeah,
to
it gets
connect some
complicated.
dots.
Yeah, it gets complicated because at one stage of development, my own development I'm talking about, I loved my father and I loved my mother. And yet they both believed very, very different things.
Mm,
And so how do you, like the tension of how do you love people and not put together, but I don't agree with this, but I don't agree with that. But you actually believe in something that I find quite harmful, or you're actually fighting for something in a way that I find quite harmful. My mother was, and continues to be, I mean, my mother is a Spitfire. She does not suffer fools lightly, and she will call it like it is. And she has a lot of righteous conviction about things. But as a child, she can also be very frightening because she
Mm.
came with a lot of warrior energy. And so, as a little girl growing up in that household, it was the threat of violence from my father. He was physically violent. That's how he got control over everything. So he wouldn't speak. He wouldn't, like, he's not going to yell at you. He's just going to smack you. And then my mother is not going to smack you until the very end. She would always have a wooden spoon. But the verbal violence was really intense
And frequent, I'm hearing.
and frequent. And so, in the household I grew up in, and now it's a diplomatic household. So you can imagine the culture of image is everything. Hosting people is everything.
Mm.
Keeping up appearances is everything. Keeping your private life separate from your political life. As children, we were part of a political system of hosting people or going to events, right? And there were lots of codes of conduct
That's
about,
been very tricky for your mom.
oh, my mother, no,
Or for your
no,
parents, when
no,
your
no,
mother
no.
had this public life that was so against your father's public life.
That was not tricky for her. She enjoyed it.
Mm.
And so there was a lot of fighting behind the scenes because he would be embarrassed and she would say, I'm speaking my truth and I'm standing for what I believe in. And he would say, this is not your role, right? Your role is to support me.
Mm.
And she would say, F that. And then here I am in the middle going, I just want to be a good girl and I just want to be safe. And why can't the two of you just get along? Like I had a really difficult time. And then as I became, as I got to middle school and as I became a teenager, it became very clear in my household that there had to be a choice made. It was my mother has a very you're with me or against me ethic.
Mm.
And she also believes she's always right. And so I very much aligned myself with my mother, also because I liked her values much more than my father's, right?
Mm. Mm.
So the cost of forming an alliance with my mother was more violence from my father.
Mm.
In short, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And then it became a real split that you're either going to be compliant over here or you're going to be a righteous rebel over here. That was an incredibly painful dichotomy to be put into as a child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and that actually was quite traumatizing. And I think for a lot of my early adult life, I mean, I grappled with Christianity. I left the church. I went into world religions. By then, we had lived in enough cultures and enough languages and in enough places in the world that I had a massive, like, third culture kid identity crisis. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I didn't feel like the world really made sense to me. I didn't understand. I was like, it's so obvious to me that we should love one another. What is getting in the way? Like, it's so obvious to me that violence is a problem, that tribalism is a problem, that othering is a problem. So, I had internalized a lot of the teachings from my mother in the intellectual realm, and I think that was super helpful. And the part that I feel like I worked a lot on for myself was the spirit behind the values.
Mm-hmm.
The spirit of my mother's approach was really good at firing up the people who already believed what she believed. But it wasn't that great at reaching across a difference
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because she was in it for the fight and she was in it for winning the fight.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, and that's her superpower. But I realized that I had a lot more attraction to building more cohesion, building more connection, having more nuanced, deeper conversations, like bringing more people along, not alienating, not, like fighting. It felt a little bit to me like a different form of violence, just taken from
Mm-hmm.
one realm to another. Now I think I'm sort of rambling. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
You are.
Okay.
But
I'm like,
I'll ask it
sometimes I
again
can get
because
lost in my
you were,
memories. I'm like,
yeah, yeah,
am
yeah.
I
You
answering
were,
the
you,
question?
you were so close. You were so
Okay.
close to tying it all together. So I'll ask the question again, and I bet you'll be
Okay.
able to wrap it in a bow. Um, the question is, how did? Oh, yeah, you've partially answered it in a lot of different ways. So
Okay.
the question was, how did dealing with these sort of warring
Hmm.
styles, and ideologies
Hmm.
lead you to be interested in nonviolence?
Oh, well, there you go. I wanted to find a way that actually brought people together. I became a lot more interested, not in the argument of who's right and who's wrong, but more in the realm of what does it take for us all to heal? Why the division to begin with? What do we do with the problems of power hoarding, what I saw as a problem of violence and wanting to get power over everything? And then the problem of fear. Why are we all so afraid of one another? Why are we so afraid of difference? And so some of those questions got me, of course, into international education, into psychology, into spirituality. And then, of course, when I found, as I mentioned, when I found the philosophies of nonviolence through Gandhi and through Marshall Rosenberg, that's when I went, oh, this puts it all together for me. Oh, I can now start organizing around the ethic of do no harm. And then what does it mean to do no harm? And where does the protective use of force, which I don't think we have enough of in this country right now, this is in the United States, but how is the protective use of force fundamentally different than the punitive use of force, which is what I grew up with? And how do we protect what it is that we really care about without dehumanizing people along the way? And so that's
Wow.
become a big part of like the big psychological and spiritual questions that I've asked for most of my life. And that took me into a lot of healing work, education work, psychology work, training work. Yeah.
So for those who don't have a deep background with nonviolent communication or political science, protective use of force, I'm going to really summarize it, but I've actually written about it. Maybe we'll find that essay later.
Right.
Share it. Protective use of force means applying the smallest necessary amount of force to prevent a greater harm. So super classic example is grabbing a child who's running out in front of a car, right? Like you just grabbed a child as they were walking with a cookie, it's harmful. But in the context of they're running out in front of a car, you're actually preventing, right? The amount of harm that you're not incurring, imposing is less than the amount that you're preventing. And people who talk about self-defense or defense of others will often claim to be using a protective use of force framework, but if you actually look, you're like, well, could you have done it with less force? Could you have done it with less force? Could you have done it with less force? Like, there are mass shooters who get taken into police custody alive. And then there are other people committing much lesser harm who get killed. And the police will say, well, we had to prevent them from doing something. And yet it actually would have been possible to prevent them with less force. So does that capture it well, Yvette?
I love that. Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
As you were talking, I was thinking, for me, it also includes a level of care that when I'm implementing force and power over you, because I enjoy the feeling of power and I don't really care how it impacts you, and I'm going to rationalize it in my worldview of goodness. It's a different act than when I am stopping you from doing something and I'm intervening, but I am not losing care for you as a human as I do so. I realize that I'm restricting you or I'm taking away a freedom temporarily, but what I haven't taken away is my care for you. You remain human to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then there's that can be contrasted with punitive use of force. It can also be contrasted with instrumental use of force, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Tell me more about instrumental use of force.
like a mugging or colonization, or when you harm someone in order to get something.
Got it. Yeah.
Then you see them as an object, right? Like when you harm someone to punish them, you see them as an enemy or evil or bad or something. When you're doing instrumental use of force, you see them as a means to an end.
Yeah, perfect.
And then when you're doing protective use of force, there's still a person, and there's something bigger to attend to.
Yes. And the objective, in my understanding, tell me if you see this differently, with the protective use of force, is to establish safety for all parties so that healing, learning, growth, shifting, reconciliation, reparation, whatever it is, can happen.
That sounds great. And there have actually been instances of murder as protective use of force, and then that's not available.
Yeah.
Like, kill someone who is in the process of killing many.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's
So in those extreme circumstances, we bump up against some limits. Yes. Yes.
Let me find your other questions. This was really rich already. Question one. Oh yeah, cool. So let's see. Oh, it's 4:20. Of course it is. I'm going to skip some questions.
Yeah, go wherever you want to go.
What do I want to do? Hold on. I love all the questions and like we don't have enough time. All right, I'm going to combine the next two, which is yeah, I'm gonna combine. You've got three questions here that are somewhat similar.
Ask it however you want.
And I'm gonna say them all and then cross my fingers that we'll have time for the last question as well. So we've got, how do you understand the connection between personal healing and systemic change? What practices help people transform fear, shame, and defensiveness into compassion and resilience? And how do you integrate spirituality and psychology in your work to support both inner growth and collective liberation? Those could all be different questions, but if we pretend they're all one question,
okay.
What can you share?
Okay, let's pretend they're all one question. The way that I see it is that inner work and outer work are not separate. They mutually affect one another in a bi-directional way and in a very nuanced and complex way. So if we think of it as the spiritual principle of as within, so without, as without, so within, then there's this interactive way in which I feel like I work with the human psyche to undo internalized systems of oppression. And what that means in a practical way is you help people love each other. And how do we do that? You get grounded in what's good about you. And how do we do that? We understand that, as Marshall would teach, everything we've ever done is a tragic strategy, maybe not always tragic, to meet a need. And we reclaim our needs, we reclaim our feelings, we do the work of internal wholeness. We stop othering, judging, and splitting the psyche. And in doing so, on this healing and growth journey, we begin reintegrating everything that has been othered. And as we are able to do that for ourselves, it extends out into the world. We start, the illusion of separateness begins dropping, and we begin seeing more and more humans as just like me, even with the diversity out there. We don't need sameness for coherence. We can have tremendous variety and diversity, a lot like an ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem. And we begin learning how everything works together in an interdependent way. And we learn how to begin working with life. But a lot of that journey is understanding the ways in which we have been traumatized, oppressed, controlled, judged, and fed stories that are complete illusions and that generate, maybe not illusions, but they generate tremendous, tremendous suffering. And I feel like a lot of what I do is help people tell themselves a new story that is compassion-based and that is focused on the alleviation of suffering, not the exploitation and capitalization of suffering, or the acceptance of it and letting it live inside of ourselves. So as we do the internal liberation, as we learn how to love ourselves, we're more available to love others. Now, it can go the other way around too. As we end up in conditions and stories and communities where people treat one another with dignity and care and connection and curiosity, and we can wake up without all the shame, and our nervous systems can re-regulate. And as we experience that, the idea of what is normal in life begins updating. It doesn't have to be this normal thing that as a 10-year-old, I thought that's just the way that the world works. It doesn't have to work that way. We, so I'll pause there, actually. I'll pause there for a moment and just see where you want me to go from there.
Yeah. I heard a lot of wonderful stuff. Like, right, the external world influences our internal world, which in turn influences who we are to the external world. Right. And so we can intervene in any place. We can intervene in, we can actually be different toward others.
Mm-hmm.
We can intervene in, okay, the others may not be in the room, but the stories they told you, let's disrupt them and tell a new one.
Mm-hmm.
We can intervene in who are you and how are you and how do you have space for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We can intervene in how we see others.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can intervene in how we treat others, and we become their healthy story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you want to talk a little more just directly about when I'm hearing the intervene, and I'm like, yeah, let's talk a little bit about like the practices. I make a choice to get curious instead of to become afraid. Or when I notice fear inside of me, I learn how to witness my own fear compassionately, regulate my nervous system, and act from a different part of myself than a fearful, security, safety-based tribal part of myself. Without othering that part, without saying that there's anything bad or wrong with it, but I take responsibility for her. I don't project my fear onto others and expect my conditions to be different so that I can feel more secure. I bring it the other way eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the beauty of a cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
You shift something one place,
Mm-hmm.
and the next thing can shift, and the next thing can shift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's something I think you said, and I want to draw it out, make sure that I heard correctly, which is when we accept all the parts of ourselves, we have more room for others.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like I don't know, contrapositive of that, I think it is actually the contrapositive, is when we're not accepting others, it often is because there's some part of ourselves we're not accepting.
Yes, 100%. If I've taught that it's bad, which I was taught that it's bad to be too outspoken because you'll never get married. I was told this all the time. Yvette, you're far too strong-willed, you're far too stubborn, you're not feminine enough. No one's ever going to be attracted to you. My father told me this
Yeah,
all the time, right? So,
yeah. Which is ironic because he was married to your mother.
yeah.
he had
Listen,
chosen someone far more outspoken than you
I am very,
in
very
his
aware.
romantic life. Okay,
That's
go on.
right. I'm very aware how I was used as a tool for these two people to have a fight with one another through me a lot of the time. So that's a different story. But, looking back, I'm like, oh, I was just a part of this game that they were playing. I've lost my train of thought.
So if you were taught that then you're gonna have
Oh,
to.
so then I, for a while, thought, oh, that's bad. Don't be outspoken. Don't be rude. You have to be polite. And rude people, the crass, direct people, and the people who use that bad language, like I got very prissy for a while about like, you can't be rude and you can't be outspoken and you can't be one of these like crass, my mother would say low class people. So there's classism in there too. Let's add that. So then those became the bad ways of being. And I couldn't be that way. And so I also couldn't tolerate anybody else being that way around me. So then I would help them be good people by letting them know how bad it was of them to be these things, right? But I think as I began saying, oh, I'm done being a good person. I really just want to be a whole person. And I want to be an authentic person. And I want to be a healthy, whole, coherent, powerful person, but not the kind of power that hurts anybody. I want to be like a powerful, like for love kind of person. All of a sudden, a lot of that journey was, well, then you're going to have to love up the part of you that's super rude, and you're going to have to love up the part of you that self-silences, and like let's go in. And suddenly, what if you're allowed to be angry? And what if you can learn how to be angry in a more skillful way that is still in alignment with do no harm? But what if your anger is really healthy and good for you? And what if you're allowed to have a boundary? And what if you're allowed to speak directly about where you really stand about something? And what if that isn't something that other people aren't allowed to do either? And what if we learn how to do that well in ways that foster interdependence and learning and critical thinking? And what if that actually makes us stronger instead of more divided? And that became much more exciting for me.
And
Yeah.
also you had the space for all of you and you had the space for other people.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, when Marshall once said very, very early on when I was working with him a lot more. And he had said something about how you can learn how to enjoy other people's anger. And I thought that was the most like, no way. I was so afraid of anger for a lot of my life because there had been so much violence. And when he was like, yeah, you can just relax in the face of other people's anger, my mind was like, what? You can what? You can? And I loved this idea. It was so inspiring to me. And I made it part of my life mission to get completely comfortable with human emotion. That somebody could be, like having a temper tantrum inside of me, and I was not going to lose my center. I was still going to figure out how to be in relationship with that, how to work with that. Like I use a lot of animal imagery, but like riding a bucking horse, like, and not in a dominating way, but in a very relational, taming, I'm on your side, soothing kind of way.
Which actually leads perfectly into the last question, which is,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean by returning non-love with love?
Mm. Yeah, I'm actually doing a lot of writing about this because when I say that, usually people think being passive and people pleasy and letting other people just do whatever they want, and then you just go, you smile and go, oh, it's okay. And that's not what I mean. What I
That's
mean
not
is
what I
that,
heard.
okay, good, okay, good. But it's for me, it's about holding onto somebody's humanity no matter what, while refusing to enable destructive behavior. So I'm not going to enable harmful, violent behavior. I'm not going to excuse it. I'm not going to say, oh, we're all just different. It's not that. But it is about working with it to transform it, to heal it, to confront it, to contain it, whatever is needed, depending on the situation, without losing touch with somebody's goodness and their humanity. So, whatever intervention or however I'm going to respond to you, I will make a deep commitment to seeing your goodness through all of it. I will hold you back from harming. I won't allow you to speak to me in certain ways if it is harmful and it's outside of my capacity. I will prevent you from harming someone vulnerable if you can't stop yourself. But I will not pathologize you, vilify you, other you, or dehumanize you in the process.
So what this makes me think of,
Mm-hmm.
my best friend is a really extraordinary mother. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when her oldest was small,
Mm-hmm.
when they were about, I don't know, 4, 7, I'm not sure. And
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have tantrums when they were 4, so it must have been a little older. Um, she would say, "Come here," and give her kid a hug in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of a very angry tantrum.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the image that came to
Yeah.
me.
It's that kind of wisdom that so much of what we want to judge as bad, wrong, awful behavior, and it is, we're not going to pretend it isn't, comes out of a deep, deep well of pain that in most extreme cases, somebody has become so disconnected from that they are now operating with no conscience, no empathy, no care, no connection. That's a extreme form of violence that happens because there's no conscience left because they've disconnected so much. But the reason that a human being would be that disconnected tells you about a lifetime of suffering. And so I don't want to enable the destructive, harmful behavior, but I also don't want to dehumanize the person who has suffered and gone through whatever they have gone through. Things have happened to them that I probably can't even fathom. I want to maintain compassion for that ember. And that's who I want to keep trying to relate with, bring forward, bring sort of cajole out of the darkness, if you will, of the tremendous suffering that people are engulfed in.
Yeah.
I see violence as being an act of desperation, and I want to care for what that person might need because I think it is the quickest path to helping someone become less violent when they can find better ways of meeting their needs than hurting other people, domineering, you know, controlling other people, judging other people, dividing the world, and then getting rid of everybody who's not like you.
Yeah, my mind went to some powerful people and speculation of what they might have gone through. And
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah,
we're going to go into that right now.
no. But when you see
Ah,
people who do not want to work with truth, you do want to ask, what was so dangerous about the truth once? And what is the well of shame that would come out if truth were to come out? And what is the amount of suffering that we're trying to avoid? That does not excuse it or condone it. But if it helps rehumanize just a little bit, I think that's helpful. It means that I can interrupt violence without becoming violent.
Yeah. 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 Oh, okay. So much to say that we're not going to say it yet. Yvette, share with us about your free gift.
Oh, I have a communication starter kit on the website. It's just it's an introduction to the basic framework of nonviolence. It walks you. It's a video that walks you through domination-based systems and then connection-based systems as it's expressed in language and relationships. So starting with a stimulus, it walks you very much through the basics of nonviolent communication with a lot of sort of psychological bonus pieces along the way, just to contextualize it a little bit. And I'll give you, the basic tools of observation, feeling, need, request as a alternative to evaluate, think, strategy, and demand. And it gives everybody just the very practical tools in a very quick video walkthrough. So if you want some basic communication-based things that you can start doing differently to move a little bit more into a connection-based frame, then it's free. And just listen through that. You get a flow chart with all the choice points,
How cool is that? Okay. We have time for some questions. We've got 40 people here.
How lovely.
Somebody's got to have a question. questions for Yvette, or even shares.
Comments. Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, or even comments. I think there actually were some comments in the chat. I know some of them were about, I have to go take care of my father who lost his dog. Yeah, CG wrote, that level of disconnection is a manifestation of a lifetime of suffering. That's what you said. That hits deep in me. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I know. I say that thing about tell us about your gift and people think it's all over, but I don't want anybody to miss the gift. Questions or comments for Yvette? I mean, I could talk with you for 3 hours. And I want to hear from the audience. What would you like to know?
I imagine, and I'd love someone to tell me if this is true or not, but I imagine that a lot of what I'm saying just resonates with what people on a call like this probably already know and probably already believe and are probably already practicing. I mean, is that true? Or is there anything that you would disagree? Or yeah, I'm just curious. Like,
do you want people to put a number in the chat, or do you want people to actually share?
If anybody has anything to say on that, I'd be happy to hear it. And if not, then that's okay.
We do have a question in the chat, and
okay.
A lot of it is familiar with me, and for me, right, which makes sense because we're so aligned, and it's taking things to a deeper place, right? Like, yeah, compassion is resistance. How much might that? Oh, okay, we've got questions.
How is compassion resistance?
The first one is being with anger. What's your orientation perspective now? Compassionate as resistance. How might this look at a group, community, or larger scale? What are you seeing where are you seeing this in action? How do you discern what you have the capacity for when you're interacting with someone who's angry and disconnected? And then just
is that all one question?
No, 3 different questions.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh my goodness. I
know. That would be a lot of questions. They're pretty diverse. And then just somebody was just saying that they do recognize a lot of this, but your articulateness is refreshing and welcome. Thank you. So you've got options.
Let me go through them one by one. Paul.
Perfect.
Being with anger. Okay. So when I think for the most part, I'm going to oversimplify it because of course any one of these we could do 12 hours on, but oversimplified. When I'm angry about something, it tells me about 2 things, what I care about and where my boundaries are. So underneath anger, I'm fighting for something. It's like a fight response is coming online. Like there's something worth standing for, and there's something worth fighting for, and there's something worth there's intensity coming up around something. that's really a form of wisdom. That is a form, or it's a boundary that's coming up. Like I'm angry because I need some fight energy to push something away that has the potential to harm me or harm other people. So it's really life affirming energy. And what we want to learn to do, in my view, is have a really great relationship with our own anger so that we can learn how to use it like riding a galloping horse skillfully, not just hanging on for dear life while it tramples everything in sight. Okay. So you want to actually be the rider, not holding on to a runaway horse. So we've got to learn how to work with our own anger. And we need the energy of anger. It's really, really life affirming energy. But we don't want to use it to dehumanize, to cause harm, to be violent. We want to use it to protect and stand for what we want, right? With energy and passion and intensity. So that's my brief thing on anger. And as I become more familiar with anger as it moves through me and more trusting of the strength that I have when I'm angry and more trusting of myself not to abuse the strength that I have by harming others or just cathartically releasing it on somebody else because it feels good for me and then leaving them with a harmful impact. As I'm able to do more of that, I'm also able to be much more skillful when other people are angry around me. Then when they're angry around me, I don't get so scared so quickly because I actually know what to do with anger. And anger isn't scary to me in the way that it used to be because I have more strength and capacity than I used to have. So those are some quick things on anger. Compassion is resistance. I see it in action right here with Alice, for example. I see it. I see it when I hear people on the media saying things like, we believe in we're standing for certain principles. We're standing for certain values. We're standing for a way of being that is organized around figuring out a way to solve this problem together. When people are not making it about identity politics, when people are not leveraging it to a message to whip up fear and division, and people are speaking counter to that without vilifying and pathologizing whatever the other side is, that is one of the ways that I see it happening. And when we're having conversations like this, and I see it, honestly, I see it in my membership program. I see it in conversations from the heart. I see it in community where people are trying to have challenging conversations about things that we might disagree on. For example, the Conversations from the Heart community has community calls where there was a point where they were doing community conversations on really hot political topics where people had a lot of differences and using the tools to practice staying in connection while sharing different takes and different values and different ways of approaching something. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to be practicing. I think we need to be putting ourselves in some of those situations where it's a little spicy and a little bit uncomfortable, and we're going to get some practice working with our nervous systems and finding our voice without overriding other voices. So that's a little bit of where I see that. Compassion as resistance is basically, though, I'll say this. This is, again, oversimplified, but for brevity's sake, there are those on the planet who are interested in exploiting suffering in order to gain power. And in doing that, they enjoy creating more suffering, and they want to use your fear of suffering to control you. Compassion as resistance says, I don't care what game you think you're playing over there. I am about the alleviation of suffering. That means I will look suffering head on. I will see the suffering. I will not minimize it. I will not deny that it's happening. I will recognize and identify where suffering is. And I will do what I can to alleviate that suffering, whether it is in me or somebody else or in a relationship or in an economic system or in a social system or in a cultural system or in a school or in a family, wherever it is. My resistance is not falling into the compliance that comes from the fear of suffering that you are exploiting to try and control me. So that's how I see that piece. The pitfalls of working for change. Pitfalls are, I'll use my mother as an example, becoming so strident that no other voices really are free to come into the room, or that we are shutting down any kind of difference prematurely, or that we're not really slowing down enough to think in very complex ways about very complex problems that we're solving. Coming in with all my great values and saying, but I know the right answer, and like imposing it on other people. Um, Falling into the duality of us versus them. I mean, there are a lot of those kinds of things, and how to track and navigate them. I assume that I do all of them at some point. So I just look for the moments that I unconsciously fall into some of them, because I internalize my mother. She lives inside of me rent free. There's no way she's not going to show up sometimes, right? And so when she does, I'm always noticing it. Sometimes I catch it after the fact, and then it's about relaxing and saying, "Oh, I love you anyway." It's about a lot of graciousness, not needing to do anything perfectly. Another thing from Marshall that I loved is just being willing to do it badly all the time, but then have the repair conversation, be able to go back and say, I think I was a little strident. Did I shut you down? You know, I was getting so passionate about blah, 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 blah. I don't know that I really fully heard where you're coming from. How was that for you? Can I have a do-over? It's about learning how to be a work in process all the time, not trying to perform something. And I really, really do believe for myself that letting go of this idea that we have to be good, or that we're on the good side, is a really important part of undoing the moralistic consciousness, so that we can get back into what is effective, what works, how do we build a world that works for all people, not from a place of moral superiority, but from a place of sustainability and ecological viability, and keeping room for a lot of diversity within that. There you go. Follow up. Anything else? Boom,
There
boom,
was a
boom.
question that there was a question about, and I feel like you answered this tangentially, but there was a second question about anger. How do you
Oh,
discern what you have the capacity for when you're
oh,
interacting with
thank you.
someone who's
Yes,
angry and
yes, I see
disconnected?
that. Yes, I see that. Sorry, my puppy needs some attention, apparently. Um, how do you discern what you have the capacity for when you're interacting with someone who's angry and disconnected? Um, I personally am tracking my level of nervous system activation. If I start to get too triggered or too scared, that's always, if I'm going to start fighting back or I start shutting down, that's when I know it's time for me to gracefully bow out and get resourced and come back when I can stay more conscious. So I don't want to stay in front of somebody. If somebody else is angry and I can feel myself getting hooked and wanting to fight, or I find myself getting scared and wanting to people please, both of those are cues that I'm about to just move into default adaptation coping mechanisms. We're not really having a conscious conversation. We're not doing anything transformative. Sometimes I just let that happen. You know, I just go, oh, but I know we're now back in the old conversation and we're going to just play out this old thing. And I don't really have the capacity to do this differently. And when I have some time on the back end to think about it, I'll do some hindsight, little foresight, a little debriefing with myself, and then I'll try again. And if I can catch it and bow out, that's great too. Does that
Mm.
help? Does that give you enough? Or let me know if that's not concrete enough.
I think I think we're gonna take it because of the
Mhm.
time.
Perfect.
Um, and I apologize that Julio has spelled your name wrong.
I don't mind.
He
No
speaks
problem.
another
There are
language.
many ways.
So Yvette's free gift, Heart-Based Communication Starter Kit, is in
Mhm.
the chat. I really recommend everybody grab it.